Good morning still, I'm delighted to be here to talk about what's been happening with Malbec in the United States and where Cahors will fit into that and where Cahors should go in the future as far as Malbec in the United States is concerned. So, where are we with Malbec in the United States? Well, look first at the American market. The American market they're the ultimate consumers. Somebody said to me this morning, they buy with their eyes. And so they look at how wine is packaged, they look at the price, they look at everything that surrounds the wine before they actually get to the wine. And so anybody who's making wine for the American consumer has to remember that sight is probably more important than taste for an American wine consumer. They're not going to consider the taste until they've decided that the wine looks good. It looks good on the table, looks good on the shelf in the supermarket, or wherever they see it. So you have to remember that. And the second thing is they're going to buy with price. The retail price, anything that sells over $15 US, is difficult to sell in the United States. There's this break point of $14.99, which makes many French wines more difficult to sell perhaps, but also presents a challenge to producers around the world to position wines which will be available on the US market for under $15. And bear in mind the US market is a complex market. It has a number of levels of importers, distributors, retailers. So you have lots of different people through whom the wine goes before it actually gets to the consumer, which means, of course, there's a markup each one at every level. So $14.99 is quite a tough barrier to keep under. But that's important for the American consumer. So we have packaging and price. And then we have taste. But before that, we have what I've called the Kardashian effect. American wine drinkers are very fashion conscious. They like to follow fashion. And who's actually leading that fashion? Well, I am. But also there are the sommeliers, the retailers, other members of the media. Anybody who's in a position to influence the market and to influence consumers is listened to in the United States. The American consumer is still not quite comfortable making their own decisions. They like to have information, they like to have advice, they like to be able to follow advice. I mean, at Wine Enthusiast, one of our most successful products is an app which basically tells you where to buy, if you're going into a supermarket or looking at a restaurant wine list, the app will tell you what we have thought of that wine, what rating we've given it. And there are other apps just like that, but the point is the American consumer wants advice. So, as we give advice, we also follow fashions. So, for example, I've listed out some wine fashions which have affected the United States American consumer. It's Pinot Grigio, mainly from Italy, Grüner Veltliner from Austria, Sauvignon Blanc mainly from New Zealand as far as the American consumer fashion conscious is concerned, Gewürztraminer, not probably from Alsace but more likely from California, Rosés, now that's where France comes in. Provence is the big success story of this year. Sparkling, they love anything sparkling, they love. Champagne is at the top, of course, but Prosecco, Moscato, anything with bubbles in it goes into an American consumer's glass, and they love it. So, where does Malbec fit into that? Well, Malbec, as Evelyn has already just said, equals Argentina, and especially so in the United States. I mean, I have a figure here. My colleague Michael Shatner, who reviews Argentine wines, has reviewed 2,287 Malbec from Argentina in the past few years. Now, that's a lot of wines. That's how the market is dominated by Argentina. So we may talk about Cahors being the original Malbec, but it's not for the Americans anyway. Argentina is the original Malbec. If you ask an American consumer, where does Malbec come from, they'll say Argentina. Then if you ask them again, where does Malbec really come from, they'll say Argentina. As far as they're concerned, they believe Malbec originated in Argentina, and the Cahors is the newcomer. So it's something you have to. Any producer of Cahors has to get beyond that point to actually make people understand that Cahors is the original. And I haven't really talked about the fact that, and I need to now, address the fact that Malbec is such a small part of the American market. The American will take wine from anywhere in the world. They're omnivorous, if you like. They're very happy to drink anything as long as I said, the packaging is good, the price is good. And you must never also forget that California is still 68% of the American wine market. So the rest of the world is 32%. When people buy California wine, they're buying it by brand. They follow a name. I mean, I have friends, I mean, I know I'm English, but I have many American friends, and I'm married to an American, so I understand a little bit about it. They buy the same wine every time, because they know where they are, they feel safe, they are willing, they don't necessarily want to break out of their cocoon of comfort. Maybe that's not true of younger drinkers, but certainly of older drinkers. And also, when they're buying wine, and this is a big advantage for Argentina, lots of Americans either are Hispanic in origin, therefore speak Spanish, or speak Spanish because that's taught in school, or because their neighbours are Hispanic. So Spanish is the second, perhaps soon to become the first, who knows, but certainly the second language of the United States, which leaves France somewhere else in terms of language. So it's much easier for Americans to buy Spanish-speaking wines than it is to buy French-speaking wines. Now, we talked about Argentina as far as Malbec is concerned. What about America? America makes a lot of Malbec. And we know where it's bottled in France, is where it's made and bottled. It's bottled in Cahors, and generally in the southwest, in Bordeaux, and some in the Loire. But you look at that list in yellow of the states where, and there are many more, where Malbec is made. Even New Jersey. California, Washington, Oregon, New York, Virginia, Colorado, as I say, New Jersey. So American Malbec is as important to the American consumer as Argentine Malbec. And that's something maybe we should consider if you're exporting to the US market. The Malbec is not just Argentina, it is also domestic. I did a little bit of analysis of the wines we've reviewed at Wine Enthusiast. We used the 100-point scale of brands from Argentina and brands from France. And when I say brands from France, that means essentially Cahors. 139 brands from Argentina, that doesn't mean 139 wines, it means 139 brands, were reviewed in 2012 by my colleagues. The average price was $18. That included the really top wines from Argentina. I reviewed 76 wines from Cahors, in 2012, 76 brands. That means probably 76 chateaux with different wines for each chateau. The average price was $35. So that, coming back to price, never forget price, that positions Cahors at a different level of the market. And now look again, this is back to prices. If you look at that graph, the most of the wines from Cahors are under $20, way under $20. You can get Cahors, Argentine Malbec for under $10. I think the cheapest is about $8 US. So Argentina is selling value as far as the American consumer is concerned. And yet Cahors is not bad either. Look at that, 24% of the wines I reviewed sell for under $15 from Cahors. So that's pretty good. And the fact you have 2% of the wines over $100, and one was actually $290, is less relevant than the fact you have good value at the lower level. But do the American consumers know that? I'm not sure they do. They think Cahors equals French equals expensive. That's often an image. I'm afraid, blame Bordeaux, blame Burgundy. But the fact is, that's the image of French wine. It's complex and it's expensive. So as I said, we rate our wines on the 100-point scale. And the top ratings I've given to wines from Cahors over the years are those 3 wines, which all got 94 points. And they weren't cheap. They're very good wines, of course, as we all know, but they weren't cheap. But at the same time, I do have a number of Cahors wines which come out as best buys, which means they're under $15 and have a good rating. So I think Cahors can span the spectrum of price and quality. The challenge to people in Cahors, people who make Malbec in Cahors, is to persuade the American consumer of that. Or maybe not. Maybe, in fact, Cahors should position itself as the top Malbec of the world. Maybe you shouldn't aim for value because you don't have the volumes they have in Argentina or in California or the United States in general. You have top chateaux, you have estate wines, making top quality wines. So maybe Cahors should think of itself as the quality Malbec, what I call the super Malbec. Super Tuscan was the fashion a few years ago, and that did wonders for Tuscany. So maybe Cahors should think about doing the same thing. Maybe the future for Cahors should be selling top wines, well priced, but top wines, top quality, and that should be the image that Cahors projects. So at which point I leave you with any questions, but thank you for your attention, and I do challenge you to go out and look at the American market with different eyes, maybe. Certainly, it's a complex market, but it's open to anything, and it's now the largest wine market in the world. Thank you.